I'd like to hand over to Bruno, my friend and colleague on the program committee, Bruno Sepodes. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Bruno is a PhD in pharmacy at the University of Lisbon. He's a professor of pharmacology. He's a well-renowned scientist. He's published. He speaks at scientific events. But I think most of all, we know him as the chair of the Committee for Orphan Medicinal Products, a member of the CHMP at the EMA and the Committee for Advanced Therapies. He's been working in this field, the regulatory agency, since 2008 and has devoted these last years to really being a force for change, support, and a force for good in our community. Thank you, Bruno.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Wills, for your kind words. It is a sincere pleasure to be here, and it's very difficult to follow all the speakers we just had from my fellow co-chairs, from Wills and Eszter, but also from the very intense and very close to all of us speeches from Tom and also now from Igor. And I'm very happy to learn some martial arts later on, and since I will probably not learn much, I will count on you to help me, to defend me. So nice friendship started today. So I'm here actually to move us to the next part of this morning session and the last part that will guide us to lunch. But I have been honored to be able to bring to the talk the young patients. It's also a reminder that I'm actually the oldest of this panel, so I'm no longer categorized as young, but it is definitely a very interesting panel. While preparing this, and I was listening to this morning's speeches, and Wills just mentioned something that for me is still a guidance since I joined the Committee of Orphan Medicinal Products in 2008. And then became chair, which is the inspiration that rare diseases bring to all of us. Of course, the need, the patient's needs and their fight is always an inspiration to us, to keep us moving towards a better future. It's an inspiration for parents and families. It's an inspiration for health professionals and caregivers, but also to regulators, that those strange human beings that apparently do guidelines and force us to deal with certain actions that we don't like. So regulators have a soul, and we want to bring the soul back to regulators. So I think the rare diseases area is definitely moving that way. One thing I think young patients want is to feel, and this as I'm privileged to have a vice chair of the COMP that is Leslie Green, well known to everyone here in this community. And at breakfast we were thinking, what do young patients want? And in fact this comes to three I's. One is sort of not an I, but you'll see. One is inclusion, independence, and to be in control. So that's the third I. And this is something these people we have here today, these friends we have here today, have been doing through their lives, and that's why we want them to share this with us. We want to build capacity. We want to use the capacity building expertise from these patients to bring us to a future that is a game changer. They have been game changers all their lives, because that's why they are here today. And Igor you made your own game change when you decided to start a fight. So you are the living example of a game change, and so are all our guests for the next minutes. But it's time to rethink what we need to change for the future. And Eszter said and I love the moment when Eszter said, it's different from what's the matter with you to what matters to you. And this unique vision from patients, and in this case from young patients, will definitely enrich our vision on how to build a better world for people suffering from rare diseases. So with no further delay, because as you know we're a little bit behind time, I will start inviting our guests for this session and panel discussion. Igor, you already know very well from the last, we all got to know you very well from the last minutes, and this was really impressive. But now I have the pleasure to continue introducing the other members. I will not follow this order, but I will start with Emma Rooney. Emma Rooney lives with type 1 Gaucher disease, and with the National Gaucher Foundation of Canada, she initiated the My Normal Storytelling Project. Emma sees the ability to share and connect our stories, the stories of people suffering from rare diseases, as a game changer for the global rare disease community. She is very active on social media, she blogs, she speaks out using stories that provoke change. To share what was growing up with Gaucher and the changes that were needed for her family, Emma created the digital story illustrated by her young sister, and the story is about her family's global rare disease journey. Emma is quite a globetrotter. She was born in South Africa, diagnosed in Brazil, but considers herself a Canadian, having grown up in Toronto. For the last 3 years, she has been navigating through a new language and healthcare system because she's living in Germany. In her spare time, Emma loves to run. She's a member of the Running for Rare Diseases team, which supports the NORD and NIH Undiagnosed Disease Network. So, Emma, welcome to the stage. Our next speaker, I met her first at the EMA, actually at the lunch talk, precisely on the involvement of young patients in the regulatory framework. And it's Irina Rotariu. Irina was born in Romania and has lived in Aberdeen for most of her life. Became part of the Scottish Children Research Network Young Persons Group in October 2013, and this is an advocacy group for for children involved in research. Being a member of this group, she worked with investigators and pharma companies to ensure that patient documentation is age appropriate, convey the correct messages and relevant messages to young people. She also advised on clinical trial protocols and how they can be more acceptable to patients and young people. She has been, as I told you, engaged with some interaction with the EMA, and she's just finishing her first year in medical school at Aberdeen University. Welcome back, Irina. I have now the pleasure to invite Sina Lerhol to the stage. Sina Lera is the Secretary General of the Norwegian Association for Youth with Disabilities. She has an MA in European Studies and has previously worked as a political advisor on youth health for the association. Lerhol was responsible for the Norwegian Association of Youth with Disabilities work on youths with rare diseases. She has a rare muscular disorder and has experienced the difficult transition in the healthcare and social service system that adulthood can bring. The Norwegian Association for Youth with Disabilities, for those who don't know, works to ensure that the healthcare system recognizes that youth need adapted and holistic healthcare services, holistic being the important word, that take the life outside of the healthcare system into account. Synne, welcome to stage. I have also the pleasure to introduce Eszter. Eszter is a fifth-year medical student at the University of Szeged. I'm probably not saying this correctly, but it's in Hungary, and has worked as a member of a gastroenterology research group investigating pancreatic rare disorders. She's a volunteer of EURORDIS, and this is the first time she's joining us in this very familiar conference. Her father suffers from a rare disease called epidermolysis bullosa, and she and her family have struggled with the torture that this illness became to the family. Therefore, she's doing her own fighting, trying to draw people's attention to rare diseases and the importance of tolerance and help to patients that want a better quality of life. Esther, welcome to the stage. And last but not least, made in China, Xingqiu comes to join us. Xingqiu lives with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease type 4. She's made in China, as I just said, but acquires her mixed accent from studying in the US and France. She's been involved in the rare disease community since 2013, working with the Chinese Organization for Rare Diseases as a project officer. As a researcher, she conducts comparative research on social care and services for people with rare diseases and disabilities. And as a rising journalist, she writes for Caixin, NetEase, Tencent, and Financial Times, the Chinese version. She's currently working on her own journalism project and also reporting in-depth patient stories from a comparative perspective. Shun, it's an enormous pleasure to have you here. Please join us and welcome. Okay, so we are at a more cozy environment now. So I will kick this discussion with, I think it's the question, when we connect with youths, and I'll move just a little bit back so that I can see you all. When we connect with young patients, and nowadays we heard today, Will's just mentioned technology. And the first question to you, and you grew up probably all of you with more technology than I did, even though we're not so far apart, but I had to say it. But how did technology, and especially the new tools that you have available, social media, etc., helped you to communicate your own situation, your family situation, and to get help or connection with others? And connected to this, how can we improve that aspect? How can you attract, because we do have these tools available for a long time now, a few years, but there's so much more we can do. So who would like to start?
Ladies first.
Ladies first, that's a good one, Igor. So well done. Who wants to start? Emma.
Okay,
sorry.
So are you skipping ahead, or do you still would like us to talk for 5 minutes, or are we going?
Yes, I was
that still the
skipping
plan?
ahead,
Okay.
But since you were first,
Okay.
perhaps since it's the first time you talk, you can, before answering the question,
Okay.
introduce yourself.
Okay, and maybe
Using
we
your
can
5
do
minutes.
two things at
Yeah,
once
of
to
course.
move this along quickly. So in terms of being a youth, I guess I'm probably say I'm becoming quickly an old youth, but a young adult. I share my birth year with the formal formation of NORD and the Orphan Drug Act in the United States. And this is definitely a game changer, was a game changer in my life, being born in 1983. But I wanted to begin to say a little bit about a game changer in the life of my family in terms of our journey with rare disease. So I was born in South Africa, and at the age of 3, I was diagnosed with type 1 Gaucher in Brazil. And 3 years after that diagnosis, which really was a diagnosis that my parents received, I was the same child. I hadn't changed. It was they were the ones that had to deal with this information. But 3 years after that diagnosis, they were able to take me to be seen by Gaucher specialists at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. And this came about after writing literally hundreds of letters to hospitals all over the world, trying to find information about Gaucher. And this trip was the first time that they had any connection to news about the Gaucher community, to doctors who knew about Gaucher and had actually seen other Gaucher patients. And it was at this time that they were told that research into Gaucher was well advanced and that they should expect a treatment within my lifetime. And for me today to think about hearing that kind of information from my parents sitting in a hospital, it's unimaginable with our access to information on the internet. And I can't even begin to understand fully what that must have felt like for them. But it was game-changing information that came from this connection, which was kind of where you started us off asking about, but pre-social media, pre-internet. And that information, even though we weren't at a point and wouldn't be for a few more years of having access to treatment, meant that they were able to leave with hope and a feeling of being less alone. And so I've been thinking a lot about, what does this type of connection mean in the world that we're living in? And I think it's okay, other people have used quotes, so I'd like to read one to you. This comes from Susanna Fox, and she's the Chief Technology Officer at the US Department of Health and Human Sciences. And actually, she's done much research into healthcare and technology, and often draws attention to the role of the rare disease community in advancing the connections. But as a Chief Technology Officer, she said, the most exciting innovation in healthcare today is people talking with one another. It's not access to information that's going to make a difference, but access to each other, being able to connect. We are all data, but it's meaningless unless we can bring the stories of our data together. And I think for me, thinking about what does it mean to be part of the connected generation, and specifically for the rare disease community, it's been a lot on my mind lately. And hearing the game-changing news just this month that the first child with Sanfilippo syndrome received gene therapy in an initial trial in the US was pretty incredible news. To be thinking, we are living in the future of medicine. I called my parents immediately because, 3 decades of struggle, which is my entire life, with gene therapy. I remember my father in the most traditional ways, going door to door, raising money for a gene therapy trial in Toronto. And now we were at a different stage. And in the press release released by Abeona Therapeutics, they spoke about the 18 years of research and development, the relationship with Nationwide Children's Hospital. But the thing that really stood out was the quote that none of it would have been possible without the support of Sanfilippo Foundations. And then I thought about the video that went viral, the Saving Eliza video, which was from one family's perspective. And in that video, they talk about hope is a nice word, but we need action. And that was Eliza's mother who said that. And that video resulted in over $2 million raised. And of course, that is not enough to conduct a drug trial, but I think we're living in the age where patients are not going to wait for progress as promised, but they're going to be part of building that. And the importance of moving the research and development and the storytelling to bring this all together is really critical, and something that we couldn't have done in previous times. In terms of the specific question about young people, and let me move on quickly now, as we are seeing an improved quality of life and extended survival in some parts of the rare disease community, and I completely recognize that my experience as a type 1 Gaucher patient is a fairy tale story, and it's not what we're seeing happening for many patients, but we are seeing improved quality of care and many different things. But I think we're going to see a desire, and we're already seeing it with this panel today, for more young people to take on a leadership role. And in my case, the inspiration for this definitely comes from the support and advocacy of my parents and the incredible care that they provided me. And I often say to people, especially parents who are searching for treatment or cure for their children, I say, drugs do not raise children, healthy children. It's families and communities that do this. But I think this example of the leadership of so many parents in the rare disease community, we're going to see that as young people are able to play that advocacy role going forward in a bigger way than's been possible in the past. And the tools for learning and for connectivity are going to really allow us to do this. And in many ways, we are living in the future of medicine already. All of these game changers that will be discussed over the next 2 days, we're already seeing pockets of that innovation, but we're living in a moment where we have to really speed it up, scale it up, and as I think Tom was talking about earlier, start to discuss issues of true accessibility in making this happen. We talk a lot about making sure that rare disease can be a public health priority, but I think we need to see it as a global health priority, and especially, as I said to you earlier, Bruno, in my case, genes don't know borders, and we're going to have to, it's wonderful the work that's being done in Europe, and it sets an example for collaboration, but I still think it's limiting. We live in a very globalized world, and we're going to have to continue to build our network much bigger.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Emma. Very good. And this is the kind of energy that is needed, so I really enjoyed.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Let's continue then. Now with Irina. What are your views, and if you want to use your prepared introduction, we would all gladly like to hear a bit more.
Well, as Bruno mentioned, I'm Irina. I'm part of the Scottish Children's Research Network Young Persons Group. And we do a lot of work with investigators and pharma companies. And in terms of sort of getting more materials and things more age appropriate for clinical trials for young people. So for example, we've had investigators coming to us with information sheets or a poster or sort of the little nitty-gritty bits about getting young patients in for follow-ups and things. And we've shared our views on that, about what we think would be most appropriate, or whether the language used was age appropriate, or if it was too simple or too complicated. And so that's the kind of work that we do. And to me, this involvement of young people, as Emma was saying, is really, really a crucial thing that I think will definitely continue to grow in the future. We in Aberdeen are the only young persons group of our kind in the whole of Scotland. And if I'm not mistaken, I think us in Newcastle at one point were the first two in the whole of the UK. And now some other members of the young persons group are away to go to Barcelona in June to meet with young persons groups throughout the world and all share their views. And that kind of thing wouldn't have been possible many years ago without this new technology and social media and being able to communicate. So that's just something I'm really excited about.
With this collaboration you have in reviewing this information, the feedback can only be good. You've been having a good feedback for this. Do you change a lot of things when you review these documents, for instance?
It depends on, as I say, the material that we get. We've had some things where we looked at them and the majority of the members of the group have thought that that's been perfectly fine and it's all been great. But that tends to be sometimes because we find out that maybe there was already a bit of young person's input into that. But there have been some things where, for example, it was a questionnaire and we've each taken one and read through it and handed it back with lots of different scribbles and changes all over it. But all our feedback has been really well received, and we've always been really glad to see that some investigators have come back and said, here are the changes we made, what do you think of it now? And so yeah, it really feels like we're doing something, we're making a huge difference.
That's it, to be heard.
Yeah.
It's good, because or else if you don't get the feedback from the other side, then it's very well. I remember that you were at the EMA also talking about the involvement, this action, and the importance in the review of this information more regularly. Do you, and this is, I'm sorry to continue all these questions, but do you see this as an opportunity to involve young patients more in the regulatory arena? Because we've been talking about the social part, the treatment part, but the regulation, we also need young patients, and we're doing our part, we're trying to get people involved. Do you have any feedback from young patients that have been involved or in this?
I've not particularly anyone that's been involved, but I think that the work that we are doing sometimes looks as if it's going to lead that way. Mm-hmm. We're getting slightly different types of things to work on nowadays, and it definitely looks as if it's going that way, and I think that's really important. Because it used to be, I think, that a lot of sort of grown-ups didn't think that young people knew an awful lot about the kind of technical parts, and which was fair enough, but because of all this new technology and access to all this new data, young people are really, really educated nowadays. I mean, I even look at my younger brother. Sometimes we'll have a conversation with my parents about something, and he'll say something that is just so grown up and so sort of, he just knows, he sounds as if he knows his stuff. And I think, how on earth do you know that? But we're a generation that likes to find out more and educate ourselves, and I think that that could be really useful.
Very good. Absolutely agree. Thanks. We'll be back to you. Synne, what about you?
Well, before I started university, I hadn't really been a part of any rare disease community. My brother has the same disorders as I, and other than that, I didn't have a connection with it. But then I started university, and then Facebook groups started popping up. And first there was a group for my diagnosis, and then there was a group for all disabled, and then there was a group for my community in the local area. And then suddenly you have these discussions, and people are sharing links and news from America or other parts of Europe with trials or new technology or respirators or new masks or whatever. And we bring this to our physicians and to our healthcare professionals, and we are an actor as well as a patient. And that's been a really a game changer for a lot of us. And of course, just the fact that you can Google about just about anything. That has its downside as well. Yeah. Maybe not everything is fact-checked. And I remember I personally entered a website that said I would die when I was 2 years old, and I was 12. So there was, you need some fact-checking, but you know more. You know where your disease stems from. You know the community that's available. And
you said, I think, a big, like it or not, Facebook changed the life of many.
It did. It did.
Now you have Instagram and Twitter and all of that,
yeah.
But the game changer was Facebook and the groups and the ability to talk, the chats.
I think there were groups before, like hidden forums, but it's more accessible now with a common platform. But I represent many organizations that represent youths, and the ones with rare diseases. Mm-hmm. They are perhaps most active on Facebook and on Facebook groups and forums because they are so alone. And Norway is a very small country, but it's a wide and long country, so quite a bit of a distance between each rare young patient. And Facebook has enabled them to speak to each other and meet up and share information. So that's been a...
Absolutely, and when I was introducing you, Synne, I used the expression that the Norwegian Association for Youth with Disabilities, and I like this, they tend to look to ensure that the health care systems recognize that youth needs adapted and holistic healthcare services. Yeah. That take the life outside the healthcare system into account.
Yes.
And this is transversal to what we're also trying to do when we look for instance, even at the significant benefit of as a major contribution to patient care, mm-hmm. The significant benefit of certain drugs in certain situations. And this is listening to Tom's provocative speech. Would you like to comment or say anything?
I agree on almost everything he said. It was brilliant. And I just want to say that the thing is that, yes, if I go to rehabilitation, I am at a medical facility. But if I had gone when I was 19, I still had to finish my education. Yes. I still had friends and a boyfriend, or I still had a life outside. And if you don't take that into account, you're not viewed as a person. You're not viewed as a whole, complete individual, and that's one part of it. And then there's the other part where medical professionals often talk to parents, and then they don't start the transition into adulthood that soon. I'm going to speak more about that in session 5, so please attend. But the thing is that children are growing up. They're becoming youths and young adults. And that transition needs to be taken into account in the healthcare system and by healthcare professionals, because you have different needs. As children, you have pediatrics. It's adapted. It's a system that's made for children. And then when you're older, you have geriatrics. It's made for older people. And then young people are sort of falling in between.
It's a nebulous area when...
Yeah, it's a blank space, and in that blank space, we all know how this works. You have to get an education or separate yourself from your family, and you're becoming independent and forming relationships. And a lot of things happen in that period, but the healthcare system doesn't really recognize that. And that is what we as an association will work to achieve in Norway, and we hope that we can connect with others who will work for the same cause in other European countries.
I also think there's a more social awareness, even with you've probably all seen the movie, The Fault in Our Stars. And it's that age where, and there's that situation where the doctors and the parents are saying no to a trip, and they both want to do it. So, and the things how they manage to do it and how it transformed their lives, it's really this sort of impact that there's an age, a specific age, where you should be empowered to and listen to. So definitely it's a point that this sort of youth interaction and speaking out loud helps. I'm continuing with the ladies, Igor. I'm following your proposal. Yeah. Thank you, Synne. Esther, it's a different case for you. Your parent, your father suffers from a rare disease. Your involvement is a little bit different. Please, have the floor.
Yes, as it was mentioned, my father suffers from epidermolysis bullosa. And in my childhood, I always saw that his legs and arms are covered with wounds, and he suffers from terrible pain. And I started thinking about how can I help him. And of course, I was sympathetic and tolerant, supportive, but I wanted to do more for him, and that's why I joined EURORDIS this year, and I became a volunteer. But I'm a beginner in this field, and I was wondering how can a medical student can help these patients, and in my opinion, it's a very good idea to involve the medical students in the work of rare disease organizations, and if we organize meetings and even camps for rare disease patients, it is a good chance for the medical students to meet these patients, and it can help to be understanding and sympathetic, and to meet the real problems of the patients and the struggles, and therefore the education and a lot of studying can be more sufficient. I think these meetings can also improve the communication skills, and the future doctors can be more understanding, as I mentioned, with the patients. And last but not least, we can have a good time together.
Definitely. Esther, being a medical student also, and I completely relate to something you said. I think the training at the university, especially the health-related courses, is not enough in this area. So you can go by through the 5 years or 6 years basic studies in medicine or pharmacy or or nurse school, whatever, and you don't touch deeply, or at least in this matter. So I think that change is needed, not only raising awareness between colleagues and students at the time, having courses and training. We're trying to do the same in Lisbon, but it's definitely helpful. And EURORDIS with the summer school, for instance, is doing already an amazing job with that. But it's an example to follow, especially in the health area, to communicate more. And then, did you get some friends involved in with this, or with your, because it's also a personal project, and it's
Not yet, but I hope.
You're here to help you.
And I have good news that in Hungarian medical education, rare diseases are involved in the curriculum of biochemistry and pediatrics, and as I see it, they get the same emphasis than the other diseases.
Of course.
So I think it's a good direction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Esther. Well done. And to the last lady I have the pleasure to introduce again is Synne. So what about you? And you'll have to mention how, as a journalist, you tend to do some other changes.
Yes, and first of all, just to make a quick comment on Professor Tom Shakespeare's work. As personally, I quote a lot of his work in my own academic work. So today, I finally meet a real person. I'm very lucky. And second, as other young people mentioned Facebook and Twitter and Instagram in their activities, unfortunately, these are not available in China. It seems that we are young people living in another earth. But fortunately, we have other media channels.
Okay.
Yes, and first, I just want to say something about myself and how I get involved in this community. And thank you very much for inviting me to this huge panel discussion. As Emma, I'm not that young, but I'm looking young, fortunately.
That's good.
And
yeah,
my name is Synne, and a company's name made in China, I swear. Currently, I'm living in France, working on my studies and research. I have CMT disease type 4, and I just got my genetic test result 2 weeks ago in Paris. The test result confirmed my diagnosis made 20 years ago in China. So I have been involved in this community since 2013, when I began to work with Chinese Organization for Rare Disorders. And before that, I didn't know much about the rare disease world, and I didn't consider myself as part of it. But that was not the first time I had been connected to the community, because when I studied in the United States, I was referred to a local MDA, that is Muscular Dystrophy Association. And at MDA, I had an opportunity to try the different assistive technology. I consider it as a life-changing appearance of my life, because it's enabled me to live more independently. As we all know that there are not many products available in China, so I had an opportunity to know the products and technology available in other countries, and it empowers me more than before. So after I went back to China, I joined the rare disease movement without hesitation. And in the past 3 years, we have been working very hard to connect the Chinese patient groups with their international counterparts. And I'm conducting research into social services and social policies for people living with different diseases and disabilities. And I initiated a research project studying employment and social care for people with CMT disease in China and in the United States. As to my journalism project, I write articles to a lot of Chinese media, like the Financial Times, the Chinese version, NetEase, Tencent, and Caixin, which are all very influential Chinese media. And I write stories of the patient. I study patients living in different cultures and societies. And more than that, I'm trying to study the social policy in each country, because we think it's also good for China to learn from other countries' experience. And I also blog a lot, although most of my blog posts are about complaining about the Chinese and the French administration. No wonder we're all socialists. And they turn out to be very popular, and people show great concern for people who are struggling with the disease and who are struggling with the social barriers at the same time. So that is my current journalism project I'm working on. And I always think that there's a lot of social stigma and prejudice against people who are different in China. And mass media plays a very important role in shaping people's mind and people's ideas of people who are different than them. So I'm trying to employ mass media as a powerful tool to use the right language and to lead the general public to the right direction. Yeah, and that's all.
Very good. And did you have, writing about rare diseases, what's the feedback from like Financial Times in China, etc.? When you write about these topics, what's the feedback? Are they positive to it? Is there any?
Yes, I'm very happy that because I read every comment in my article, I really know how people can respond to my article and how people think. And I'm very happy that for the new generation of Chinese who are more educated, who are more open-minded, so they are more socially acceptable or tolerant of people with disabilities, and shows concern that we need to change our current system to make it more friendly to these people who are different. Yeah, although maybe there are some negative comments that we are, but I think we can just ignore them because most of the comments are positive.
Because you mentioned something, we tend to forget that Facebook and other social media is restricted in many ways in China. So you had to find alternative ways to connect.
Yes.
So when the world was adapting to Facebook, and you were probably in the United States or in France, or you were used to a way of work and tools that suddenly you had no more. So
yes,
when
I
going
think
back,
that's the advantage of technology, because with new technology we can get on Facebook and other English websites.
And it's amazing what you can do when you reorganize. And I've been in contact with some colleagues also from China and rare diseases community, and it's amazing what they are doing there. So it's a live community, definitely. Thank you very much, June. Thank you very much. Well, the gentleman to the end. No more ladies, no. Just us. So it's up to you, Igor.
Yeah, okay. I can take it.
So, your views, well, we know your story.
Yeah.
So that's your views on the social interaction, the media, the social media. Something that it's important that we haven't actually, but how do people look for you and ask questions? Because you contact a lot with young patients. What do you tell them? How do you educate them? How do you get them involved in this? How do they learn to fight their fight through you?
Well, I would like to mention again, like a few minutes ago, I'm a member of the RareConnect team. I work as an online community manager. I'm responsible for the Balkan region. And, it's a great pleasure for me and provides me a great opportunity to help people living with rare diseases, to provide them value information, and to inspire them by my personal story, of course. But, I would like to mention that my parents, my medical team, and of course, boxing gave me everything in life, so I feel a responsibility to give something back. And, I work, I was an amateur boxer and kickboxer for the last 7 years, and now I'm an assistant coach in my club, and I'm a volunteer in the hospital where I was treated 20 years ago. I work with children, and they ask me a bunch of questions, of course, and they're very different questions because, depends of their age. But I know the most important thing is that I'm trying to learn them some of my life values, you know, and
Absolutely.
one of them is, I always say to them, to win. There is no measure, just a sheer will. And I like to speak to them about those kinds of things and try to inspire them. And of course, their parents, I always ask their parents about opinion and always trying to provide them with some informations. And now I have a bigger possibility because of RareConnect, of course, and I can provide them much more valuable informations. And
Well
I don't know what to say anymore.
You said very good things, no worries. What I propose is that you remain available if people want to have, because I think you definitely, we are on top of time. I don't want to delay more lunch. But it's been very inspiring for me. Today I gained 5 more friends. 5? No, 6, sorry. 6. It was you, Igor, extra number. It's really inspiring. We all have a lot to learn from you because you mentioned, in this 45 one-hour talk, we mentioned social interaction. We mentioned the relation with caregivers, the relation with parents, the relation with friends, the use of orphan drugs. So there's so much we can somehow get you involved with, and using your energy, we can only benefit from it. So I feel very humble sitting here. I learned from your life experience, and definitely you should be available for everyone to reach you during the conference. They're really nice people, and I can now call you proudly my friend. So thank you for being here today. It was a sincere pleasure. Thank you.